Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. This is another Tim May podcast, and my co-pilot this week is Bill Bender. And Bill, man, let's just jump right into it. If those games over the weekend didn't move you, you definitely are not a college football fan. Is that correct?
Oh, I mean, the emotion. Week 7 was amazing, start to finish. I mean, we got the games that mattered, those ones that from Michigan to Penn State to Tennessee, Alabama, TCU, Oklahoma State, all the way down to if you stayed up late and watched USC and Utah.
Yeah.
And we were texting during that game.
Yeah.
So that was cool. It was wild. And you saw the emotion on the field. Definitely some top 10 shakeups in the making. And but none bigger to me. I mean, we can get into each of the games. The biggest one was definitely Tennessee, Alabama, and everything that you saw all the pictures of those fans on the field. It was an amazing game.
Yes, they're lucky Rocky Top didn't fall into the Tennessee River there, man, with all those people. It was crazy, but I just want to jump into it immediately. As we're recording this, because we had to kind of do this from a time crunch standpoint. The polls haven't come out. I expect Ohio State probably in these polls to stay number 2. I don't necessarily want to get you to project in that, but here's what I do want to hear. After this weekend and half the season to go, if you were a college football playoff committee, give me your top 6 coming out of this weekend, or just give me your top 5, whatever you feel like. That would be 4 and a spare. You see what I'm saying? Go ahead.
We're getting close to the first set here in a couple weeks in November. Yep. And if it were this week, I mean, I would probably go Georgia 1. And I know Ohio State fans aren't going to like that, but I do think their best win is Oregon, and beating Oregon, who's a top 10 team. Ohio State's best win is Notre Dame. It's not their fault that Notre Dame has gone the way that Notre Dame has. And I just think there's something like they would rank the defending national champion first. We can quibble about it, but Ohio State would be 2. I would put Tennessee 3. I think you move them up after the victory against Alabama. And then I would go Michigan 4 and Clemson 5. And I think that's what most people would say. Maybe you flip Ohio State and Georgia, maybe you flip Tennessee and Michigan, but I mean that's kind of the board as I see it at this part in the season. And the crazy part about it is, Tim, is Tennessee and Georgia have to play, and Michigan and Ohio State have to play. So We are going to see it on the field. But what I'm curious about is, I'm already getting this question. I don't know if you do. Does that mean, let's say Ohio State, Michigan 11-0s? Does the loser backdoor in? Tennessee, Georgia, both 11-0s. Does the loser backdoor in if Georgia goes on and wins the SEC championship? It's interesting. I mean, yes. You would need help for that, but I think it sets up 2 very huge division games between those rivals.
Yeah. I mean, what we're talking about is if that scenario plays out, one or the other is not going to be a conference champion, not even going to play for the conference championship, if things stay according to chalk right now. And that would be a fantastic conundrum for the committee, because what if Alabama does now run the table, the favorite of the committee, Alabama, what if it does run the table and ends up winning the SEC championship? I mean, there are all these scenarios that can play out. But it is crazy, man. I always tell people, just when you think you know what's going to happen in college football, hold your breath, because things just sneak up on you. USC looked like they had that game put away, for example, against Utah, or it looked like it had control of the game. Let's put it that way. Utah just kept throwing punches, man. And then Cam Rising, oh my goodness. What a finish to that game. And then they pull the upset. This is a team that went into Florida and got beat, basically at the last second by Florida. Didn't make the 2-point conversion, whatever it was that happened there. It was a close game and stuff. So there are all these ways now you can sort of start comparing teams, except for that one team out there that's really tough to get a comparison on with a lot of the others is Ohio State, right? I mean, because Ohio State's toughest part of its schedule is coming. Obviously, Penn State gets whacked by Michigan. That score was even though it was lopsided in the final analysis, it was even closer than it should have been. I don't know if you agree with that, but right. Ohio State's the one team you're kind of scratching your head about that we've got in this top 4, isn't it?
They have the best offense in the country. And if they don't, then Tennessee does. And what a playoff game that would be, by the way. That would be fun to watch those two go up and down against each other. Because although I'll say this, and you mentioned Alabama. We can get into them in a minute, but I think Ohio State, they have an identity offensively. They can run at you, they can pass. They have had key guys out. I mean, I think they have the best collection of skill possession talent in the country around CJ Stroud, who's the Heisman frontrunner. I think the defense is better, although Michigan probably gave them something to think about tomorrow, because that's what the game comes down to me, and we can get into that later. Is Jim Knowles' defense versus that rushing attack?
Yeah,
because I mean, Michigan, that was impressive yesterday, being able to run for 418 yards against the top 10, I put it in air quotes because I don't know that Penn State's a top 10 team, but yeah, I mean, I think Ohio State, if Notre Dame were better, I think we knew more about them. I am curious about Saturday. They're playing, they're going to win the game, but I'm curious what the offense looks like against Iowa. Is another one of those tough, keep it in front of you type Big Ten defenses.
Yeah. I'm curious too. I think that's an acid test for this offense, only from the standpoint of they've been bound and determined since the season was over a year ago to show that they have improved in the actual physical running game, meaning getting after people up front, creating rips and seams, etc. And Iowa's bread and butter is basically making you play in a phone booth and then winning that phone booth battle, although they don't have enough coins to put in the telephone now. People don't remember phones used to be in a phone booth, and their offense is lacking of coinage. Agreed. I mean, seriously, sure. It's like they're not even trying sometimes, Bill.
Well, and Ohio State has been the most complete team on both sides in terms of not being tested yet on the scoreboard. It doesn't mean they're not being tested on the field. I mean, Wisconsin does things that can test you. Yeah. Georgia has been pushed by Missouri, but they kind of got their act together. And I think,
wait a minute. Georgia got pushed by Kent State. I mean, seriously.
Yeah, that's my wife's moment. Yeah,
Kent State gets beat by Toledo, which Ohio State beat, whatever it was. Yeah. I think they just scored another touchdown against Toledo. But Go ahead now. You digress.
No, you're good. But I think if you ask most people, I think if we were doing tiers, I think those are the two best teams.
Yeah.
And you can go one or two. And then I think Tennessee and Michigan, I've always said they're like cousins. That's Michigan's SEC cousin is Tennessee. It's the same program. And they definitely have questions, but I think they both proved that this weekend, they proved that they're okay. You know, I think Tennessee deserves to be where they're at. You can't question it. I think Michigan deserves to be in the number 4 spot. Alabama's the one that I would say this, Tim. I would not take it for granted that they're just going to get to Atlanta. They have a lot of issues, the penalties, the special teams errors, the receivers aren't Jamison Williams and Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith. If they didn't have Bryce Young, I think they'd have 2 losses. I mean,
heck yeah.
I mean, he is awesome, right? He's a game changer, but I mean, I didn't understand their clock management at the end of that game. I didn't understand their defense. Like, they're supposed to be able to pressure the passer. I think if Ohio State was playing Tennessee, I don't see Jim Knowles sitting back. He would be bringing guys, right? He's not sitting in a 3-man front and just hoping to get pressure. I think they wouldn't have they let Hendon Hooker get too comfortable in the pocket.
Bill, my favorite line, especially this year, to beat Alabama, you got to throw the ball. And that's been, in my opinion, that's been an Achilles of that defense for a long time. I mean, even in that game where they beat Ohio State in the national championship game from the 2020, almost forgotten season of 2020, I mean, Ohio State lost its number 1 running back in that game, basically was playing a lot without a couple of big-time defensive guys. But my point was there were still things open in the secondary. I mean, I think Nick Saban gets a lot of credit for being a big defensive mind when, in fact, boy, they've been in some shootouts, man. And they were lucky, in my opinion, to escape Texas because Bryce Young ducked under a blitz and goes about 20 and puts them in field goal range. I mean, and in the Texas A&M game, Texas A&M's out there. Everybody's making a point that Bryce Young wasn't in the game. Well, neither was Texas A&M's basically top 2 quarterbacks, or at least top 1 quarterback. And Texas A&M took them to the very wire. And my point is, I don't think this is one of those special Alabama teams because they're not necessarily marauding up front defensively, and they're not necessarily just, I'm talking about against decent teams. They're not necessarily blowing people out offensively up front in the running game, et cetera. So what's your take on that?
I mean, they could get beat by Ole Miss is my point.
Yeah, exactly.
When they go to Ole Miss, they could get beat because Ole Miss can run the football and Lane will challenge them and Lane will pull out all the stops in Oxford. They haven't been a good road team. And I think I think the last couple of weeks I had Alabama ranked ahead of Ohio State. I in our Super 16 for the College Football Writers Association.
Yes. Yeah.
But one of our friends in the Ohio State beat kind of chided me, and he was right. So like, I admit when I'm wrong. Like, I kind of had the Ohio State as a placeholder at 3. And I was just like assuming that we would see this like Alabama performance that is like, here's all the talent, here's what they can be, and it hasn't happened. So like I said, I wouldn't take it for granted that they get to Atlanta. I wouldn't take it for granted that they're going to beat Georgia. I mean, the more likely 2 SEC playoff team scenario at this point would probably be Georgia and Tennessee. Crazy to say, like Tennessee sitting there at 11-1 and they backdoor in.
Yeah.
Or what if Tennessee beats Georgia? I mean, what do we? That could happen too. Like,
yeah. I mean, we could have an SEC championship game that is Tennessee versus Ole Miss. I mean, that is definitely a possibility. Oh yeah. I mean,
absolutely.
That'd be crazy, wouldn't it?
It would be great for college football too, because it's not the same old stuff. I mean, I think I have a list that I'm looking at because I'm going to write this for Sporting News this week. There's this games that will define the second half of the season, and Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama and Ole Miss are there. Michigan, Ohio State. So what's a bigger game right now to you? Like, is it Tennessee, Georgia, or Michigan, Ohio State? I think they're the same game.
They are the same game. Yeah.
I think in terms of, except Michigan, Ohio State could happen in the last week, and we could have 2006 all over again, sort of. It still doesn't feel like, even if they were both 11-0, I still don't think it would feel like 2006 because it's a 14 playoff and not a BCS type deal.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. You could tell me I'm wrong, but
no. What would be cool is to watch the College Football Playoff Committee actually have to earn its cash. Because I mean, really, the next 2 of the top 4. The next 2 could be very difficult to identify and not hurt people's feelings and or justify. You know what I mean? And right. if the scenario plays like we're talking about. Hey, just real quickly, what do you think of the Big Ten right now? The Big Ten West is Purdue's almost in control there, right? I mean, when you really break it down right now, I mean, with Minnesota getting beat again, what's your take? In Illinois?
Give them a ball. Yes. Yeah. I think that when we were in Indy in July, were we sitting around saying, hey, when Purdue plays Illinois, that'll be for the Big Ten. Yeah, I didn't say that. No. I would be lying if I did. But no, I've been impressed with Bielema and this run that they've gone on, because again, they've run the football. They've run the football with Chase Brown. They've done that. I mean, for them to go through pretty much the 3 typical powers, Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota in order, and do it their way is interesting. Purdue's different. Even when Ohio State plays Purdue and Michigan plays Purdue, they make you antsy because of their scheme. And Jeff Brom's a great play caller. He is. I go back to last year. They don't have the horses to run with Ohio State for 4 quarters, but they do have the horses to make, a couple plays. And I think that game will be a lot of fun because of the contrast in styles. Purdue's one bad hiccup drive away from beating Penn State, and one bad hiccup, just awful defense against Syracuse at the end of the game from being, I know that's a lot of what ifs. I get that.
Well, no, let's face it. They needed the Heimlich maneuver after that game because they had it in hand. And then you look, Syracuse is pretty damn good, Go ahead.
Right. So they're literally 2 drives away from being undefeated.
Yes.
And Aiden O'Connell, I think he's going to get a shot at the next level. He's not bad. I mean, I think the Purdue-Illinois winner, it's a good bet. They'll be in Indianapolis. Illinois only plays Michigan. I don't think Purdue doesn't have that tough crossover game. They've already played it. They don't play Michigan or Ohio. They don't play Ohio State this year. They don't play Michigan. So
Right.
good bet. One of those two will be in Indy, which is not what I had drawn up at the beginning of the season at all.
No, I thought Purdue. I mean, my big deal was my favorite in the West was Minnesota. That's how stupid I am. But they've been.
You're not stupid. Don't ever call yourself.
Well, no, but they've been an interesting team to watch sort of dissolve. And then my other was Purdue. I thought Purdue had because I like Aiden O'Connell and I like Jeff Brom for all the reasons you pointed out a minute ago. Hey, real quick before we leave the national scene, and I asked you about the Heisman. I'll tell you the team out there that everybody ought to keep their eye on. In my opinion, they're not getting enough shrift, if in fact that's even a word that you can use that way, is TCU. I mean, TCU's the real deal. They came back on Oklahoma State in that game. That was you talk about thriller games. They were just one after the other this past Saturday. But TCU is an interesting team because they're kind of forgotten about. They've got a lot of ground to make up. But this week's polls, like I said, Truth in Advertising, we're recording this before the polls come out. But TCU should be making a jump. I mean, that was a battle of unbeatens that kind of got forgotten. Don't you agree? I mean, you've got to give it up to TCU. I mean, the way they're playing. I mean, Sonny Dykes, I almost called him Spike Dykes, his dad. Sonny Dykes has got that team playing big time, right?
Yeah, I mean, and if they were in the primetime window, I think so many more people would have watched that game, which is unfortunate because it was a double overtime thriller. Max Duggan's making great decisions with the football. He's done that all season for them. They've quietly beat 3 ranked teams. They beat Oklahoma. They beat Kansas when Kansas was on top of the world and had game day there.
Yeah.
They beat an Oklahoma State team that I thought was the most complete team to this point in the Big 12. And you're exactly right. I read Pat Forty's piece with Sports Illustrated a few weeks ago about Sonny Dykes, and it just reinforced what I've always said is fit matters in college football. And who fits more at TCU than Sonny Dykes? You mentioned his dad, all the Texas ties. Oklahoma doesn't have a Texas guy. Texas doesn't have a Texas guy. That said, one of the most intriguing games in November is set up to be TCU at Texas, because I'll tell you this about Texas. Not only do they have Gary Patterson, the former TCU coach, Quinn Ewers can play. I'm not going to do the whole what if he stayed at Ohio State thing because I don't care about that.
No.
On his own, that dude can play a little bit. And,
wait a minute. The word you're looking for there is he can sling it. Now go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, he throws it around and I'm like, and I got my Packers shirt on, by the way. I didn't know. Just to be clear, when I'm wearing a yellow shirt, this is a Green Bay shirt. That I don't want to get in trouble. But
hey, like the Chicago Bears were dressed up like the Cleveland Browns the other night. But go ahead.
Yeah, they were wearing orange. So I would like Quinn Ewers in a Packers uniform someday. Is what I was trying to say. Is
I got you.
He's got big, but that's one of the games of the second half of the season that definitely captures my attention. It's going to be fun, and if TCU wins, the other one I was going to say when you started to talk, I thought he's going to say UCLA. UCLA is the other one though.
Yeah.
With Chip Kelly, that fast, furious offense. They finally look like the Chip Kelly offense.
I agree.
And they play Oregon this week. That's huge.
Oh yeah. And they're a physical bunch, man. I mean, USC, UCLA, 2 teams headed for the Big Ten might have quite the show to put on at the end of the regular season. Hey, let me ask you this. Hendon Hooker delivered in the clutch. I mean, we can talk about other quarterbacks. CJ Stroud is the runaway prohibitive favorite to win the Heisman right now. What was going into that weekend? How does and Hendon Hooker was like number 3 or number 4 on that list. How does the way he played sort of shake up the Heisman race right now? Does it make it, in essence, a true race again? You understand what I'm saying? I know, it's middle of October, but, opinions start to be formulated. Hendon Hooker delivered in the clutch against Alabama. How does that just shake up this Heisman race?
I mean, those two are 1 and 2 right now. Stroud, Hooker. I mean, Bryce Young's still in the conversation because I was
but yeah,
not in the front. Those two are in the front. And then after that, I mean, Caleb Williams probably took a little bit of hit because it's nothing he did wrong. He played great. I mean, but when you lose games, and the rule has been in the college football playoff era, I tell people this all the time. The only person who won the Heisman since the playoffs started, who wasn't on a playoff team, was Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
So unless you're that kind of unicorn that Lamar is, and he's still doing it at the NFL level, you pretty much got to be on the best player on the playoff team. So that's why right now, CJ Stroud, very good chance. Hendon Hooker, very good chance. I think Blake Corum deserves to be in the conversation with what he's done at Michigan and in that running game. And unless you can give the Heisman to an offensive lineman, because their offensive line's pretty darn good. But it's early for that. So that would, if I had a top three, it would probably be Stroud, Hooker, Corum, and then Bryce Young. I mean, I would probably take the cop out and say he's still really, really good. So, I mean, that's not a bad list though. And I mean, Stroud too. I mean, what about Marvin Harrison? Like the guy that I'm like, this guy is ridiculous. When I watch Ohio State every week, it's Harrison 1 week, Igbuka 1 week. Haven't even seen Jackson because they've got to be able to rest him. The 1 week Mayan Williams looked like Keith Byers. I mean, they just, like I said,
Fleming, Travion Henderson.
They've got they've got the best collection of guys for those that play fantasy football. You'll be playing them in your fantasy football lineup in a few years.
Bill, do you agree with me though? Ohio State is much better defensively than it was a year ago. I mean, you can see it just the way the confidence they're playing with. Doesn't mean they're always going to shut down everybody, but there's a different defense. And then offensively, they led the nation in total offense last year and in scoring. This offensive line is better than last year's offensive line. I mean, I keep telling people this, that I was saying this before the season started. CJ Stroud might have lesser stats, just total stats, throwing the ball than he did a year ago, and is going to be a better quarterback because he's running this machine now. You can see him recognizing stuff, etc. Do you agree with those statements I just made?
Yeah, no, he's been more efficient. He's accurate. He's made some throws. I was talking to Tim Tebow about this, I think around week 4, and he was telling me there was a throw he made against Toledo that he doesn't understand how he did it, putting it over a safety and dropping it in the bucket.
They practiced that though. They practiced that throw. It's nuts, but go ahead.
Know which one I'm talking about too. Yeah. The one where he just,
it's like a sinker ball. It goes right over and then it drops in.
Yeah. He like feathered one in there. And I mean, he's playing out of great football. And the defense, again, like if Michigan beats Michigan State, which you just never know.
Yeah.
And Ohio State goes to Penn State and wins, I think we can start talking about that game, and you can, I know there's a long way to that, and neither coaching staff is going to want to hear any of it. But the big question, like we were saying at the top, is, to me, Ohio State got better in the areas that cost them against Michigan last year. They got better up front on offense. They fit against the run better. I think Michigan got better in some. I think Michigan is still, I think their offensive line is better. I think their running game is about the same. I don't know that their receivers are much better. I do think they got better. Here's where I think they got better: quarterback, offensive line, and defense is still good. It's not like there's not an Aiden Hutchinson out there, but they're solid, and they're a year into that scheme, so they're going to be good too. So I think that just raises the stakes of that game, how fun it can be. JJ McCarthy's pretty good, but they don't let him loose yet. They haven't, you know what I mean? Like everybody keeps saying he's going to have to go win them a game, and that's true. But right now they're not really taking a lot of shots down the field with him. They didn't have to yesterday. I wouldn't have done it either. I was just said, if you're going to let us have the middle, we're going to do that all day.
It reminded me of bulldozers going out, and there's trees in the lot next door to you. And at the end of the day, there are no trees there. You know what I mean? They had a little bit of difficulty in that game, self-inflicted difficulty. But then there was never a doubt that who was dominating that game. I'm talking about against Penn State. I think you agree, right?
Yeah, and that was the statement they made. I mean, Jim Harbaugh's best teams average over 200 yards rushing. He likes it that way. He doesn't. Yeah. I mean, it was weird though. They were on the verge of losing at halftime. Yeah. And they had run 50 offensive plays. So, that's why I think there's a little bit, whereas Ohio State, when I watch their offense, there's no holding back. They're aggressive, they're pedal. If it's 3rd and 3, he's comfortable throwing a go like he did to Harrison in the Michigan State game. They're very, and the contrast in styles makes the game fun. I mean, honestly, that game, I hate to like set because you jinx it whenever you do, but I mean the build up to that's going to be pretty substantial given what happened last year.
Yeah. Hey, last question for you, and let's go back to our original premise. Number one, who plays? Just give me the two teams. You don't have to name 50. Who plays for the Big Ten championship?
If I was
halfway
guessing
through the year, go ahead.
Can they bring the Illabuck Trophy? Because I would put Ohio State versus Illinois.
It's got to be. I mean, even in postseason, it's got to be up for grabs, right?
Yeah, like
it's got all those hands, it's got all those feet to grab. Go ahead now.
There's your next story.
Ohio State, Illinois. Okay.
For the Turtle.
Who plays for the ACC championship?
Clemson and North Carolina.
Okay. Who plays for the SEC championship, Southeastern Conference?
Can we do that one last?
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna pass like they do on Family Feud.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's do that one.
Come back to that one if we have enough time.
Yeah.
Who plays for the Big 12 championship?
TCU and
Oklahoma State again?
I'm gonna say TCU and Texas.
Oh wow. Okay.
I'm gonna say Texas beats them and then they have a rematch. If not, Oklahoma State, because they've taken care of their business.
And the other one, USC. That was a Freudian. Hey, I'll tell you what, no offense. And I don't care if it bothers somebody. I was kind of glad to see USC get their comeuppance, because that was almost, as this went along, it was like watching a school figure out a way to almost buy a championship with the way they conducted business from late November on, going in and getting Lincoln Riley and getting his quarterback and getting the best receiver, the Blitnikoff Award winner from last year, all coming in. And in the end, their offense couldn't get it done finally against Utah. But okay, who plays for the I just want to get that in there.
Yeah,
who plays for the
gaming the system?
What?
USC and Oregon.
USC and Oregon. So
Oregon hadn't lost. Oregon, it's weird. They
I'm with you. I hear you.
They don't have a Pac-12 loss yet. And I was sitting in the box when they got hammered by Georgia and thought their season's dead. So credit Dan Lanning for getting them. And then SEC, Tim.
Yeah.
Alabama and Georgia. I'm just going to be safe. Like, that's like taking the 10-yard out when I want to do what you said earlier. I want to do Tennessee, Ole Miss, but I'm going to throw a check down and say Alabama, Georgia.
I like Josh Heupel's offense right now. I think they can score on anybody. I like Tennessee to hold sway over Georgia. And I really do like that almost, are you kidding me? Back in August, Tennessee versus Ole Miss for the SEC championship, because Ole Miss can throw the ball also, man. And that's Alabama's Achilles. I'm telling you, you still got to make plays. But Bill Bender from the Sporting News, man, is it tsn.com? How do you, what's your...
Yeah, it's bill.bender@tsn.com. And I'm going to, we made a joke before I came on. That is my high school helmet up there. That's not Bloom Carroll. That's Fisher Catholic.
Yeah.
Proud Fisher Catholic alum, proud Central Ohio kid. And, we are getting up on high school playoff time in Central Ohio. It's always one of my favorite times of the year because, you look back at those days, and that would explain my bad picks. So I tell people is I wore that helmet. So that's why I make bad picks. I got hit on that helmet a few times.
That was back when helmets weighed. Well, no, you're not as old as me. Back when I was growing up, helmets weighed like 4 or 5 pounds, it seemed like, and they were about as protective as a Band-Aid. You know what I mean? And now they're much lighter and whatever, and they're much more protective. But yeah, it does explain a lot of your musings sometimes. The getting hit in the head too many times syndrome. Hey, Bill Bender, man, it's always a pleasure to have you on the Tim May podcast. Thanks for joining me, my man.
Hey, you're the best, Tim. I appreciate you. Take care.
And we'll see you again next week, ladies and gentlemen.